sometimes you have to trust the community to find their own use for the things you're building. A lot of games, like highly popular games, are all about emergent behavior, about the things that the players decide to do rather than what the designers decided.
Spoken like a good product manager. Actually listen to your users.
I understand the theory.
All right. Well, we just got done interviewing Sven Neumann with SVEN'S SudokuPad. Many of you, if you're familiar, you might be more familiar with the web app Cracking the Cryptic, which he also powers. It was a great conversation, really great intro to variant Sudoku for those of you that might be new to. But what were some of your takeaways, Joseph?
Well, variant Sudoku was new to me. And when I learned it and watched people play loads of different ways I hadn't contemplated Sudoku before, I thought, where was this? Like, I didn't even know that this exists. I used to play a lot, and then I don't remember. I said as much in the episode when I stopped playing. And Sven had that kind of observation. He's like, listen, like, not everybody plays. And he had a really fun phrase where he said he grew up in a pile of electronics. And that I think paints the whole picture of what Sven is building for other people to build games and create joy and challenge and intrigue for others. So really enjoyed this episode, and I think you will too.
Welcome to the Hey Good Game podcast, where we chat with the creators of your favorite games that you secretly play in the cracks of your day. I'm Aaron Cardell, and I'm here with my co-host, Joseph Ruder. Today, we're excited to speak with Sven Neumann, the creator of SVEN'S SudokuPad and the free web app used by Cracking the Cryptic. Sven, we're thrilled you're here.
I'm glad to be here. How are you?
Doing well. Sven, let's start out with what's your favorite game to play?
My favorite game to play. It's a tough one because I have a very sort of game addictive personality. So I've kind of banned myself from playing games because when I get started, I don't get anything else done. I disappear into games really, really bad. So I spend more time watching other people play games nowadays on YouTube. That's kind of, I enjoy things like StarCraft 2 and certain streamers, I enjoy their styles, what kind of games they're playing. I don't really mind too much. Favorite game, I have a vice, I think of it as where I play a game of League of Legends every lunchtime since I got introduced to it at a studio I worked at 13 years ago. But it's not a game that I'm like, it's not something where I'm like into it very much. It's more like I know how long it'll take me and I know that I can stop after a session. So it's not the kind of game I would enjoy the most to play, which is part of the appeal of it for me.
Right on. And, tell us a little bit, where are you from and where did that love of games come from?
I'm originally from Germany. I was born in Munich, but we moved to Malta in 94 now it was. I was 94. Yeah, I was about 14 years old at the time. And I basically grew up in a pile of electronics. My dad was, he was a computer programmer when debugging involved an oscilloscope. And when, I was 5, he taught me how to solder. And, he built a computer for a house in the 80s that was running the keypad code and the camera in the kitchen and all sorts of things like that. So I kind of, I never had a choice about this sort of stuff. When I was 6, I got a bicycle for Christmas and I was really mad because my brother got his first PC. So, and my passion for programming started mostly because we always had PCs where my friends had Amigas and Commodores and gaming consoles and so on and so forth. And I never had any of that stuff. And eventually the PCs I had weren't really good for gaming either. Didn't have sound, just older machines and all this sort of thing. And I kind of had to spend my time tinkering with them more than playing on them. And I think that's kind of what started me on a career of being very, very technical oriented rather than on the playing side. So for me, the game is actually making the game more so than playing it. Usually I play a game and very quickly I have ideas of how the game could be different or whatever. And then I'll just rebuild the game and make the changes. Like the first games I've made were all existing games that missed something that I wanted. And I rebuilt the game just to change that one thing. You know, it's like, oh, you lose the weapon when you die. I don't like that. Let me rebuild the game and let me not lose the weapon, you know, so I could play the game the way I wanted it, you know. And that's kind of how it started. It was a bit a roundabout way, I think.
Super interesting. Is there some of that theme even today in some of the work that you're doing?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, the other side of it was that I started at a time where I fell between two chairs. It was like I taught myself assembly programming and graphics programming, like really low level stuff very early on. Like, hey, how do I do a textured triangle, you know, purely on an 8086 CPU, you know? But it was at a time when 3D graphics card just started to appear, which I didn't have access to. So it felt like I was too late for the sort of retro style gaming, or too early for it being retro, but too late to make those kind of games when 3D games started happening, like in the late 90s, you know? So it was weird where I felt like I was really passionate about it, but the things I was making were in the sort of things that you could sell, you know, like it wasn't a time, it was past the time when kids made games and sold them to a magazine for $40,000 or whatever. And before the time where you could get a job doing that at a studio, right? So like 96, 97, 98, you know, like I went to university here and they didn't even have a requirement for computer science in the computer science degree course, right? Because there was nobody who's done programming at school, right? So it was a little strange. And then I just kind of tinkered, and that was kind of the passion there.
And, you know, jumping forward quite a bit. So you spent a lot of time in the game industry and in and around games, but you know, it was maybe a few years ago, was it, that you got the idea for SudokuPad?
So SudokuPad was interesting. At the time, I was working for a game studio, doing sort of small casual games, but in JavaScript. So, you know, had the experience from there. And I was been working with JavaScript for like 20 years. I mean, since the late 90s. So that was always made it easy for me there. And I think I discovered CTC, the Cracking the Cryptic YouTube channel, just like everybody else when COVID started, you know, watching them. And I really enjoyed them, That was right up my alley, you know. And they kept mentioning, oh, you know, yeah, we're working on that. We're working on that improvement. We're waiting for that to happen, you know. And I kept thinking, like, they've been saying that a lot. Like, that's not happening. Like, it's not happening the way they think it's going to happen. And I looked at the tool and I'm like, oh, I could fix the things that are bugging them. You know, I could do that, right? And basically, I just got in touch with I tweeted at them and just said, hey, you know, like I could fix that thing if you're keen on it, like if you ever. And they kind of, I don't remember if they kind of opened up to me right away or if I just provided a prototype or something. But they basically said that the person who made the tool had disappeared, like they wasn't talking to them anymore and they didn't know what was happening, right? And a few months had passed by that point between announcing things happening and them not happening. And I basically built the first prototype over the weekend. And at the time I still had a job, but it was all work from home at that point. And the company was winding down their engineering office here. So we were kind of like, we weren't going back to the office anyways. And then I started, I think it was July, I started working on it. And about 3-4 months, it got good enough that Cracking the Cryptic started using it. And then at that time, I already knew that I was made redundant. I had a few more months basically on the payroll, but free to do as I pleased. And that's kind of when I finished it. And we started making plans to kind of make the commercial product as well. And yeah, I kind of did that. Initially I replicated the existing tool and then I added the things they needed. And then I fixed the things and I improved the things and then started adding new things that the old tool didn't have anymore. And that's how that happened. Another marvelous and wonderful thing to come from years at home. Yeah, and it's one of those weird things where when you hear other people say, oh, you know, the chance you don't take is the chance you never have or whatever, and you don't believe it, right? But like, I'm not a networking guy. I'm not out there talking to everybody. I'm not that guy, you know? And like talking to them on Twitter was a complete shot into the blue for no particular reason, you know? Sure. And even they're not super savvy people. They're not they're not game people. They're not computer people, you know? So they were just genuine like, oh, all right, that serves, like, that suits us, that we can, like, hey, we like that, you know, like, oh, this works nice, you know? And it was kind of, you know, we just kind of came together and, you know, helped each other out there. That's fantastic.
It sounds like maybe you were introduced to Cracking the Cryptic the same way I was. I think prior to, you know, some of these YouTube videos, familiar with some Sudoku variants, but not sort of the more out there variants. And, there was a video around that time. I think it was titled "The Sudoku Miracle" that blew up, kind of went viral. Just the puzzle was by Mitchell Lee, but just the joy of the solver when he was solving that puzzle was pretty contagious. Even if you're like, I'm into Sudoku, but even if you're not, I think it's kind of contagious. But was that, it sounds like that was similarly how you got introduced?
I think I started watching them before the Miracle one. I think, actually. It might have been that one, actually. I'm not entirely certain now. But just like a lot of YouTube personality, especially in the Let's Play scene in general, it's a lot about the personality. And Simon definitely is an entertainer, and he knows how to do what he's doing. And that's like, there's a reason why I stream to 0.6 people on average, because I don't have that, right? So it's a talent, it's a skill, right? It's entertainment, just like an actor or a singer,
Yeah, well, he goes like, "Oh, you've got to be joking," right? And he gets to the next section and he goes, "You're kidding," and then it just moves on. So yeah, I watched it wanting to play. I was like, wait a second, I want to feel those feels, which is what games do for you, right?
It's interesting to compare the numbers on the videos versus the numbers on how many people arrive at the app to play the puzzles, right? Because obviously not everybody plays, so the number's always going to be smaller, But it's interesting even comparing it to things like Logic Masters Germany, like the real core platforms for puzzling, where, a puzzle gets 15 plays and it's big. And then that same puzzle comes onto CTC and it gets 5,000 plays or 10,000 plays or 20,000 plays, right? And it's the power of that broader market reach, reaching non-core, highbrow puzzling specialists kind of out there,
You reached out to the Cracking the Cryptic team and you offered to work on their game. And it seems like there's kind of like the web app for Cracking the Cryptic, and then there's SVEN'S SudokuPad.
So it's a bit of it's a bit messy on the outside. On the inside, it's actually really simple because they don't have an app, right? They were using an app that somebody else has made, Sam Kappelman Lines at the time. And they're not programmers, and they had, I don't know if that had already started at the time, but they have a Studio Goya, working on their paid apps in Seattle they are, right? But that's like a completely separate sort of setup they have. The web app, the Sudoku, like it's SVEN'S SudokuPad. There's only one app, right? And their domain is just a redirect. And in the future, I would love to kind of simplify all of this and just like, hey, there's just SudokuPad and that's it, right? It got a bit messy, and they kind of introduced me as their developer or whatever, but like we are not connected in that way at all. So really, the deal we have is that they're kind of using the online app for free, just like any other streamer is. There's other streamers doing it. And now there are some streamers that are hitting 100,000 subscribers, which is starting to get serious YouTube territory, right? But what the real deal is, basically, it's basically an advertising deal. They promote my app on the show, and they get a cut of the sales. That's really it. And it's the same deal they have with the Studio Goya app, It's just like the free app is what drives the traffic, and really the paid app is more like it's almost like a Patreon, right? It's like people paying for the paid app really support me building the free app because it's the same app, it's the same code more or less. I mean, there's some special features in the paid app. In the future, I want to kind of lean more into that, kind of providing more value to that. But like in principle, they're basically the same code base. And in the meantime, I've also had a Patreon. And I've always said, like, if the Patreon would support me 100%, I would open source the whole thing, because the real value is the community. It's not, I'm no Sudoku.com. I'm not a commercial entity that's trying, it's like, I don't create puzzles, right? SudokuPad is not really a puzzle. It's kind of a word processor for puzzles, right? So I don't make any puzzles. I don't have any algorithms that generate puzzles. When you buy the app, the puzzles that's in there are really just a trial pack. Like, here's some puzzles to get you started, right? But what you use the app for is to play puzzles that exist out there in other places and made by people who make puzzles. And now I've been in contact with a couple of them, because that's really the thing. I want to work with them to make their puzzles more accessible through the app, because discovery is a big problem, right? Like people buy my app and they're like, okay, I played the 10 puzzles. What now? And I'm like, well, if you're not active in the community, if you're not on the Discord, if you're not watching the YouTube videos with the links, the app isn't really for you, because that's where you get the good puzzles, the high quality stuff, and there's a, in SudokuCon now or in the live stream and the preparation for it all, that's where I met a lot of these people. There are people that are selling puzzles as PDFs on Etsy. There are people who have Patreons and monthly Patreon packs. And there's people who have Substack blogs where they publish, puzzles that you can subscribe to, and like there's all sorts of people trying to commercially make puzzles, like who aren't, they're using SudokuPad, they're using other tools to make them. They don't have their own software, right? The PDF is full of links to SudokuPad. It's like right now it's weird because it feels like video gaming in the 90s. Like it's very pre-online stores, proper setup, and I feel I have the knowledge and the ideas to really make this whole thing work. I don't have the business acumen, right? So I'm hoping now to work together with the people who are already selling their puzzles. They know how to run the business, at a small scale, and bring in the scale of SudokuPad, because they have a reach of dozens or hundreds of people on their Patreons. I have currently about 25,000 daily active players on the app, unique players. And there's a relatively large amount of churn. That's why my sales have been surprisingly steady. Like normally games, they sell in the first couple of months and then they peter out, right? Because people have owned all the ones who want to play the game on the game. But because the viewership of Cracking the Cryptic turns over, about 60%, I think, or between 40 and 60% every month. So there's always a steady stream of new people discovering it. Some people get tired of it. They've done a few months of Sudoku and they've kind of had their fill, but there's always new people discovering it. And it has a really broad appeal. It's international. That's why it's kind of the number puzzle. That's why the crossword stuff didn't work out for Cracking the Cryptic, because it's very English focused, right? Yeah. And Sudoku has a very broad range of difficulty as well. It has a lot of depth, but there's also a lot of casual fun to be had. Anybody who's got a site that just has generated classic Sudokus knows that. There's people who come for their daily puzzles, and that's all they ever need. They don't need the variant Sudokus or the 2-hour exploration of this complex, cryptic environment that some setter created over 3 months of hard work. It's a very broad thing. And I think that's what appeals to me and what makes it interesting even after working on it for 3 years straight,
Instead of like the classic game cartridges, you mentioned it's like the 90s. Instead of the game cartridges, you need to know a guy with a link to the puzzle, right?
Yeah, and it's bizarre to me that a lot of the commercial selling of puzzles happens as PDF downloads. PDFs, for crying out loud. So it's a screenshot of a puzzle, the rules text, an introduction, and a SudokuPad link, right? And I don't know if that's something, that's a bit technical, but for the longest time, most of the puzzle data is actually encoded in the link itself. So the links are really long. They're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kilobytes. I had a link 26 kilobytes once that doesn't work on certain browsers and things like that. So then they all run through TinyURL, and every time TinyURL goes down, the whole puzzle community is like dead basically for a couple of and that happens more often than you might think, and there are a couple of efforts to kind of categorize puzzles, but the biggest collection of puzzles right now, of quality puzzles, is probably my server logs, which is bizarre. So that's definitely something I also want to address and work on, because I would think it would be a huge shame if these puzzles would get lost just because TinyURL disappears. When GitHub recently shut down their link shortening services, puzzles were lost because people didn't have the links anymore, the original ones. And then suddenly their PDF from 3 years ago didn't work anymore because all those were using GitHub link shortening. It's a very weird low tech environment.
Yeah, I was thinking when I came across all these crazy variants of my early addictions to Sudoku, just play and play and play and play and play and play. And as I was thinking back on it, I don't remember deciding not to. And you're thinking longer term, I think the community will drive you to the next weird thing to try. And that it drives stickiness, right? You're going to stay with it. Do you see some of that happening?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for example, like a year and a half ago or something, there's this guy, Chameleon, in the community, and he's, a lot of people are very get-go-y, and many are technical as well. And he basically wanted to try something, and he just wrote his own JavaScript. He wrote his own client to play this puzzle. He wrote the code for this specific puzzle, and it was basically a Sudoku with fog of war. With the puzzle was covered, and as you were placing digit, it was uncovering the clues under the fog. And he created one or two puzzles like that with his own software, and I think it made it onto Cracking the Cryptic, and they bloody loved it, And I talked to the guy and I said, and at the time I'm like, okay, I cannot justify the work for one puzzle, right? But if there's like 3 or 4 and it looks like more, because sometimes you don't know. Sometimes maybe only one puzzle is possible with a particular set of rules. You don't really know sometimes, right? And I talked to the guy and he said, yeah, I'd love to see it. I would have done it in SudokuPad if it was possible, right? I just wanted to see this happen. And I implemented it, and now it's one of the very, almost the most popular category. And it's very beginner friendly because it gives you it guides you where to look at. So you start the puzzle and there's only a few things you can see, and that those are what you need to get started, right?
Yeah.
And whatever you reveal next is the next thing you have to think about. So they can be quite hard, but they can also be easier to get into and to understand. And it was my first sort of foray into more video gaming aspects of it, right? Where it's not just replicating what a pencil and a paper can do, but something that you can only do on a computer. And in the meantime, there's a bunch of things he made a couple of other things, like a Sokoban version where you're literally controlling a character that's pushing the digits around, things like that, or parking cars where the cars were attached to the rules. So you had to park the car in a place where the rules would make sense, sort of thing, And I definitely want to do a lot more like that. I want to do a lot more animated things because they're more broad appeal, right? Especially for a younger generation who might like to see things move, right? And I think there's a lot of mechanics that are currently being awkwardly incorporated into Sudoku, like chess move mechanics and Minesweeper style things where they say, the number in the red circles is how many mines are next to it. And the mines are 1s and 9s, that sort of stuff, But to have it actually be able to place a flag and things explode and things move and change, I definitely want to support more of that. So it's I see everything I think of, there's 10 more things right after that. And it's like an infinite fan of possibilities and work to be done. So the hardest part is to decide which work I need to do next that has the most impact and the most value as a small, I'm not a studio where I say, okay, well, this team goes on that and this team works on that. It's just me, right? So my list of things to do are never ending, and I still haven't even built the feature that this app was launched for. There was an idea for a feature that SudokuPad was supposed to be that I haven't built yet, which was scanning puzzles from a camera view, right? Hold it up to a newspaper, scan the puzzle in and play that, I started with a prototype of that, and that's what it was built for. And I decided the quality of what I could achieve wasn't high enough for what I was comfortable to sell for money. And I pulled the feature from the app because I said, if it's fine as a prototype, if it's 80% or 90% functional, but if you're paying for it and it just, you have to kind of hold it and then, and it takes longer than just typing in the numbers, then it's not good enough in my mind, It's definitely a feature I want to build one day. Nowadays, probably it's a lot easier with, all the AI and camera processing and better JavaScript and all this stuff. But it's interesting sometimes the way things work out, that what you set out to build turns out not to be the important part,
Yeah. We've both experienced that.
Sometimes you have to trust the community to find their own use for the things you're building. A lot of games, a lot of highly popular games, are all about emergent behavior, about the things that the players decide to do rather than what the designers decided.
Spoken like a good product manager. Actually, listen to your users.
I understand the theory.
I'm curious, Sven. So you talked a little bit about the business aspect earlier. You can buy SudokuPad on iOS, Android, or Steam. Looks like, at least in US dollars, a $2.99 purchase. Curious, it seems like probably a lot of the usage, though, is really on the free web app. And have you ever considered putting ads on there or
I've thought about it, and I'm sometimes like it's one of those things when you start. Like I'm not a big fan of ads, and I've been in the advertising business long enough to know that it's like the reward is small. You know, it's like you've got to show a lot of ads to a lot of people and inconvenience them for you to get pennies, right? You know, at my previous studio, the numbers were in the billions of plays, and then the ads make sense, right? I'm not in the billions numbers. So but it's one of those things when you start and you're like, oh, well, if I would have put ads on this month, I would have made $5. Like, that's not worth it to put that in front of my user, you know. But then you look back after 3 years, like, if I would have had ads on all this time, now that money would really be handy, right? Like, I could have bought the new computer I need or whatever, right? So it's one of those things I've been thinking about. I still don't like the idea. It's one of those things where, like, I also want to tread carefully because I am positioning myself kind of deliberately as part of the community, not attached to the community. You know, there are other, you know, there's Sudoku.com, there's LogicWiz.com, there's like these other apps and so on, and they sponsor sometimes, but they're not part of the community and they're not interacting with the community and not reacting to things that happen in the community. And I also feel like that gives me a certain level of responsibility, right? I can't just turn things around on other people, you know? Now, one thing I want to try, and I've been in talks recently, is what if instead of advertising just through, you know, Google ads or whatever, what if I find some people who are selling puzzles through, you know, that are members of the community, benefit the community, but they also try to, you know, sell their puzzle packs on Etsy for $2 or whatever, and advertise for them, right? Like, make it really truly contextual in the sense that they're old school advertising, handpicked, makes sense, helping back the community, you know, and these are all people that are known by the community, you know, and benefit from the broader reach, because SudokuPad doesn't just reach within the hardcore Sudoku community, which is much smaller, right? It reaches, thanks to Cracking the Cryptic, it reaches out a new community that aren't familiar with the Discord, and with, you know, the Discord is smaller than the subscriber number of Cracking the Cryptic, you know, and thanks to that churn number, I also feel like there's a lot of people that don't ever become deeply embedded in the community, right? And they would benefit from having more exposure. You know, right now, a lot of people might not even know other puzzles exist than the ones they play on Cracking the Cryptic, you know, which is an absolute shame. And all, like, the setters themselves, the people creating the puzzles, they care about the puzzle they just made and they care about the next puzzle they're making. They don't care about a puzzle they made 2 years ago, you know? But for somebody who solves puzzles who hasn't seen that one yet, it doesn't matter. That puzzle isn't worse because it's 2 years old. And that's the other thing I want to work towards, you know, an archive and a place to discover, you know, hey, you like puzzles by this guy, or you like puzzles of this difficulty, or you like puzzles that this streamer streams, hear more of that, you know. YouTube for puzzles, that kind of thing, right? Of course, I know these kind of platforms are not easy to build, so I've been very, very careful. Like, I haven't just tried it, you know. I haven't just, hey, well, here's a download script for user registration or whatever. Here we go. No, like, I take it very seriously as well from that perspective. So it's got to be secure. It's got to be, like, the first step will actually be talking to setters and making sure I treat their puzzles with respect. You know, they have full control of what happens to their puzzles. If they don't want to link to them, if they don't want them to be used in videos and so on and so forth, this all has to be, it has to start from that perspective. You know, I can't just, you know, from an external person, it might look, oh, well, we'll just go in there with 10,000 puzzles and we'll just make a website and then sell them, you know, like, but I couldn't do that, you know. So I'm in talks with the right people, I think, now. And I have, thanks in part to this live stream, I've shown that I'm capable of building not just SudokuPad itself, but quick turnaround supporting technology. You know, we did the live stream. We didn't, because of the way we were streaming from different locations around the world, we didn't want people to have to stream 2 sets of videos, you know, their face cam and the puzzle or what's on their desktop. So I actually created a real-time multi-user server where puzzle information and, you know, even cursor movement, things like that could get streamed to different locations. And I put that together in like 2 weeks, I think. And I definitely want to use that technology for other things, to support other streamers, but also multiplayer puzzling and group puzzling and puzzle races and, you know, a school doing a puzzle together cooperatively, things like that, you know. So there's a lot of, you know, everything I do is like I said before, you know, 10 more things that I can do in the step afterwards. And it's just a selection process about like what makes the most sense. And now also, you know, what makes business sense, right? It's like, you know, somebody wants better colors, but nobody's going to pay for better colors, you know? So it's like, okay, but if I let you buy puzzles in a puzzle shop, that would be better, wouldn't it? You know, it's like, so it's, yeah. I mean, you guys, I think you have advertising driven traffic driven sites, free to play basically, right? So it's also it's a tough business as well, because you need the quantity, you need the numbers, and it's not just because you put an ad on and it's fire and forget and you don't have to, I don't know, deal with Steam or whatever. It doesn't necessarily make it easy to make money with it, because you need just 100 times, 1,000 times bigger numbers than me as well.
You're right. It's a scale game, and it's a matter of, it's important to not annoy the user too much, right? Like it's got to be, something that doesn't negatively impact gameplay.
When I put my own Patreon link on my puzzles, I had people complaining, So when you finish a puzzle right now, there's a little bit where it says, hey, want to support me? Here's my YouTube link. Here's my Patreon link, And in the spirit that I'm trying to keep up, I added a setting that they can disable that. If they don't like it, let them switch it off. I basically have an inbuilt ad blocker in the app, right? All the not so much promotional stuff, even like, I have a little guy, like my face, basically popping up over the puzzle when you start it. You can switch that off, It doesn't earn me any money, so why not let you switch it off, It annoys me a little that people feel like, especially for the free app, that they can just say, hey, your free app, you're asking me to look at your Patreon link. Oh, I don't like, But at the same time, it's not worth arguing over, And I also understand that, for example, somebody who's doing a YouTube video or something might not want to have a lot of colorful elements on the screen that a person can't interact with anyways, right? And I understand that, them linking to my app in their description, in their videos to their audience is much more valuable anyways. So I also want to support them, kind of quote unquote a streamer mode, streamer tools, To me, that just makes sense,
It's fun. I mean, I think my brain's racing. There's a bunch of stuff to help with. How about yourself?
It might make sense to say, okay, what is the story you want to tell? Because like I can talk about technical details stuff, and they I don't think make a good tale. They're interesting, they're fun for us, especially if you guys are into the monetization and stuff. But I don't know if you want to, like, we kind of started where it came from and what it is. I don't know if you want to, we could do a little bit of a round trip of where I'm thinking it might go, or we can look at a little bit at the social aspect, because there's a lot about it that isn't the app or the technology, but like, hey, the viewership, the interaction between YouTube viewers and the Discordians and the other streamers, and like there's been weird things happening where, like people streaming my app got in trouble because the viewers yelled at them for stealing from Cracking the Cryptic, right? Like, like we had people literally streaming their own puzzle, but because their own puzzle was also used by Cracking the Cryptic, people were copyright striking their YouTube channels for streaming their own puzzles, just because Cracking the Cryptic also played their puzzle before when they submitted to Cracking the Cryptic for free, So it was like, there's a little bit of weird drama as well.
We did a little bit of background, right? Like, where did the pad come from? How did you get into this? I loved hearing about growing up in a pile of electronics, right? Like, you just didn't have a choice. It's so fun. Big visions of similar kinds of circuit boards and soldering that my son is experiencing with 3D printers and whatnot.
I think that my first hardcover book I still remember was literally one about upkeep and maintenance of a computer, like how to dust it and how to clean electronic boards and stuff like that. It was hilarious.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, that's awesome. I've been on Mac since I ever had a computer, and my son's asking for a PC so that he can game. And I'm like, what are you going to do with that? I don't know how to help you with that. And he's like, Dad, I'll figure it out. And it's this moment where it's like, I should just give you the money and you should go deal with this. He's 10. And so that's really exciting. And you wind all the way to now. I've worked with development groups around the world, and I don't know how you stay focused with the beach and the beauty outside. But it seems like you absolutely can. And where do you think SudokuPad goes? Where do you want it to go? And where do you think it's going?
I'll be honest. I've been kind of treading a treadmill where I'm kind of struggling towards the things I need. I'm a serious sufferer of ADHD. So unfortunately, I'm not always in charge of what I get to do. No matter what is important, no matter what I want to do, sometimes I just don't get to do that thing, right?
Sure.
And then the best I can hope for is that I'll do something different that's still valuable and still useful. Sometimes a lot of things get done because I do them instead of the thing I need to do just to have done something. So I'm not doing super great working on my own. And, office jobs have been better in that sense because somebody else comes by and says like, hey, can you do the thing? And I'm like, okay, somebody's waiting for it. No problem. Right now I'm like, do the thing, and my iOS app hasn't been updated in almost 2 years, despite the update being relatively simple and relatively important. And that's really bad because, the paying customers say, hey, the web app is better than because like there's puzzles now that the mobile app cannot run anymore. And like almost every day people are like, hey, when are you playing? Is there a timeline? And I want to do it. The biggest problem is, and this is like a technical detail, but something on iOS causes the app to lose its data on update. So I don't want to just update it because then people will lose their data for nothing. And then they'll lose it again the next time I update, right? So the next update has to fix that issue, which still will wipe their stuff. But only after that can I update. So I put this other thing that I need to do first. And that's kind of my kryptonite. And now I'm stuck anyway, so it's there's a struggle of kind of the things I need to do and should do versus the things I would love to do and I would like to do. And recently I had this sort of epiphany. I was watching all the new streams of City Skylines 2, and I was thinking like how sometimes the second version of a game is not a different game, but it's like the game they wanted to make and they didn't have time for, right? Or it's the game that they could have made if they had 3 more years on the first one. They continue on the technology that already works and then just keep working on it. And in a way, it's often for developers the place where they can kind of spread their wings a little. And it started to sink in, and I said, maybe it's time to start thinking about a SudokuPad 2.0. If not necessarily as a technical thing, but more as a planning thing, to think about it in a way where I say, I can't just keep incrementally stepping into the direction of doing the big thing. Sometimes you have to do a big thing to make a big thing, to have to take a big step, right? And sometimes big steps aren't visible, I need to do some, I need to shed some technical debt, right? I need to rewrite how things work inside. And that might take a few months without building new features. And I can't just do that. So I was thinking like, hey, maybe I need to kickstart a SudokuPad 2.0 to give me a runway of 6 months where I can actually kind of clean certain things up, build certain things, and bring it into a place where I then finally can do all the things I've been wanting to do. But also it would help me to just plan that out, to talk to the community, to find out what people think, to find out what people value. If they don't want to support that, then I know that that isn't what I should be doing anyways, right? And I have so many stretch goals. It would be perfect to say, hey, do you want this thing? For example, early on, I was working towards an editor for building puzzles. And the reason I hadn't built it faster was mostly because I said, if I'm going to build an editor, it has to be the same level of usability as the app itself. It has to be easy to use. It has to be drag and drop. It has to work on mobile. It has to just work. You have to be able to sit down and just use it, not the arcane messes that the existing tools are, which are, open source tools that have been built over time that haven't been necessarily supported always. And they're complex because, there is no incentive to make them usable. But in the meantime, that landscape has changed. There have been better tools. Other people have put in a lot of effort to create new tools to build puzzles with that just export to SudokuPad. They don't even have their own players anymore, So that's kind of gone down on the priority list. It's not like it used to be the most important thing like 2 years ago. And now I don't even feel the need to build it anymore. So that's the thing. Like I feel like a SudokuPad 2.0 gives me the opportunity to talk to the community and make the bigger plans of what should be like if given 6 months of time, what should I build? And like the biggest item on that list is a social platform, is a place where users can log in, have an account, have a history of their plays, where people can upload or set their puzzles, where they can see which puzzles are popular, where they can collect feedback from the players, where they can, and not just silly feedback, a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but my app currently it generates a full timed replay. You can save a replay, you can replay the replay, and with that replay data, you can do a lot. You can find out which puzzles are hard. You can compare play styles. Like I can say which puzzles would be a similar difficulty for you, not just for not a arbitrary 2 out of 5 rating, which might not mean anything, And I have enough knowledge that I understand, sort of algorithmic rankings to say, hey, I need 100, 500, 1,000 players. And then I can say this puzzle is good, bad, hard, easy, etc., without having to ask people, right? And I can say that if you say the puzzle is a 3, then it's more likely to be a 1 to this person and a 4 to this other person, And if you like these 3 puzzles and somebody else likes these 2, then I can figure out what is the third puzzle the other person will like, right? And I know that an algorithm can figure out which puzzles are similar to each other without looking at the puzzles at all, just by looking which people play them over what period of time, how they play them. Do they start and stop a lot? Do they play consistently? The timing of the actions. Do they take breaks? Do they think? Do they backtrack? Do they have to undo? Do they break the, So I think there's a lot of information there, and it finally is reaching the critical mass. We recently, I added a counter of puzzle solves, just very primitive. I have no account system. I have no database, right? It literally just increments a number when somebody solves a puzzle. I added that a couple of months ago, and we just reached over 5 million puzzle solves, right? And I don't know what that number means, because we never had a number like that before. And I don't know how many people do not solve a puzzle, but but people love that number, right? And it tells me I need to do more like that. I need to find out, what percentage of puzzles are being played and not solved, which might indicate quality or difficulty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like all this stuff. I'm a bit of a data nerd, and I'm a bit of a data hoarder. I want to keep all versions of a puzzle. I want to let people fork a puzzle, do a variant on a puzzle. I want to have games where people start with a puzzle, add a feature or remove a feature, pass it on to another person, and have that be done automatic, not in a community where they talk to each other, but on a system where they press buttons and it just happens and they can play these things, kind of like matchmaking. If you go to, if you log into League of Legends or whatever and you play a game, you don't need to know those people, right? And right now with Sudoku, it's very much you have to know the people. If you want to do a pair puzzle or a tridoku or a whatever, like a chain of setting where multiple setters add a constraint each, things like that, you have to know the people and you have to communicate with them in a chat window somewhere, But I want to automate all of that. I want to make that all part of the everyday experience of solvers and players, And I think that's sort of the next stage, where all the sort of implicit social contracts that people have evolved, all the memes in the community and things like that, become explicit, become available to everybody, right? I think of it like in terms of, for example, something like Twitch. There was a lot of things people used to do back when it was just in TV, right? And nowadays we have bits and we have emoticons and we have subscriptions and hype trains and all this stuff. All of this was codifying things that the communities made, right? The communities did that thing anyways, and then they added that to the platform. And now you feel like you're stuck with that platform because you can't do a hype train on YouTube streaming, right? That kind of thing.
It could be similar to early Twitter, right? Like RT, all in caps, copy paste, right? You're like, what is that? Oh, that's a retweet before the retweet
exactly.
button. Yeah, exactly.
I want to have a subscription to a channel of puzzles, and the puzzles don't necessarily have to be made by that person. I want to be able to subscribe to the Cracking the Cryptic channel on SudokuPad, and it's the puzzles they solve on their videos. It's the puzzles they enjoy. It's the puzzles they put on their Patreon or whatever, right? It's like, it's their channel, right? And it'd be all sorts of setters. But if I like a setter, I want to go to his channel and now get all the puzzles he's set, right?
Sure.
Or I want to go to all the puzzles that setter likes, his favorites, right? Like I want to hop from chain to chain to discover things.
Yeah, so
right?
It sounds like accounts, right? Not only, even for us, we don't have accounts. It's stored locally. And as people get their new phones, they lose their histories. And then that just generates a contact us. Hey guys, why did I just lose my history?
Yeah. The crazy thing was my app was actually, because of it's the mobile apps are just the web apps, right? Sure. And they're storing things in local storage.
Yes.
And local storage in a native mobile app is just a question mark, right? It's not documented. You don't know what happens, right? And for most, I would say 95% of people on Android, it works fine. They update, it works. They buy a new phone, all the data is suddenly there, Steam, I think it always works. iOS, it wipes it, right? Now in Android, it sometimes wipes it, and I don't know why, So there's all this stuff. And people have been saying they would pay money for being able to transfer their puzzles, And I want to be able to do that. And I've already thought of ways of doing it without accounts as well. But ultimately, eventually I'll need accounts,
Correct. Yeah, well, that sounds awesome. You were thinking early on it'd be 2.0 and maybe crowdfunded.
Definitely. Well, the crowdfunding is more of it's like a barometer, right? Like what people want to happen. I don't, I'm not a venture capitalist or anything like that, right? So it'll have to be supported somehow. But it's more like, can I justify not putting out new features for 3 months, right? Is the community okay with that? And if the community says, we're going to pay you for 3 months of work, then I know they're okay with it. If they say, we're not going to pay you for 3 months of work, and I'm like, well, then I can't do it, right? Then I got to do the little things every month that going to keep the sales up, and it's going to keep my patrons happy and things like that, right? So it's kind of, is that. Now, the ultimate goal, obviously, is not just to help the community to play puzzles and to help me to make a living, but it's also to help people make a living that are making puzzles, because they're the real like heroes, right? I'm not making puzzles, I'm staying away from algorithmic puzzles. That's something that's a bit of a, not staying away is the wrong word. Like I wouldn't mind having them there as sort of filler, but I will never make the app that's just that, right? So algorithmic puzzles is just computer generated puzzles, I don't mind them as a sort of intermission. If somebody says, hey, I want to just keep playing a bunch of silly puzzles to pass time while I'm waiting in line, sure. But there's so many handmade puzzles that people can never play in a lifetime anyway. So we don't actually need to, right? It's just we need to make those puzzles available. And what I want to be able to do is support the people making the puzzles. So a puzzle store of some kind would be the best way of doing it, I think. And I've been talking to some people now, and I've been looking at how it currently happens. And like I bought a puzzle this morning from Etsy, and I think it was about 50 clicks and like 5 emails. And it took me about 10 minutes. Just to get a PDF with a couple of puzzles in it, right? And it was ridiculous, And I'm figuring, what as much I know from internet technology is that cutting down that friction alone would double their sales at least, Never mind finding additional customers, So, I'm thinking, hey, how does Audible do it? Audible, I pay every year, and then I have my credits, and then I get the books, and the credits, they don't pay taxes on those, They don't pay a bit to PayPal every time I use a credit.
Right.
So puzzle credits, probably, some sort of in-game quote unquote currency. It's got a bad name in video gaming, but like in this case, I think that's how it had to be, because puzzles are so small. You cannot charge $20 for a puzzle, you gotta, right. The amount has to be small. Yeah.
Well, and maybe you can charge $15-20 for a printed version that would only cost, something less than that. So maybe there's a connection to supporting 2.0 where you get some paper, you get a physical thing, you get an option to stick it on your bookshelf. You get, right? Like, hey, this is coming, that could be run by some 3PL, right? Like, no, I know, but we could find ways to automate this.
But then that's extra work. But that's extra. That's the problem is like everybody's like the problem is always like, I know I can make more money by doing more work, right? The problem is the work I'm already doing is full time, so I need to figure out a way of making money with the work I'm already doing. And the other part is like right now there's a print style sheet, you press Control P and you get a printable version of the puzzle, I'm working with this is a completely different line. It's like I was approached a few months ago by some professors from a university that were offering me to include me in a National Science Foundation grant in terms of what's the word? Basically out of the classroom education, right? So informal education, they call it. And I want to work with them together to basically create a version of the app, sort of a white label version of the app that supports a reduced feature set to create sort of puzzles for a younger audience, for classroom use. And as part of that, I want to create a version of the printable system for, how do you print out 20 puzzles for a classroom or 20 copies of 10 different puzzles for the classroom, On top of that, my girlfriend is doing a master's degree where she did some research in Uganda, and we spent a couple of weeks there at refugee camps. And I want to figure out a way of getting them puzzles, So what can they do, So it's like I want to do a lot of stuff that is outside of just the usual selling something in a store for money,
This is a really normal thing for us. Like, it's just because you want to do it doesn't mean you should. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Doesn't mean you should. Just because you can imagine it doesn't mean you should. And just because you should doesn't mean you have the time. It's like or the energy, right? So I hear you. I hear that kind of nudge in that same direction. But there's all kinds of fun going on here, and what you're supporting is all those joyous moments, right? Like we were referring to on that miracle Sudoku. Like, are you kidding me? And it seems like you have a number of those joyous moments yourself while building these things. So, to the degree that we can. Yeah, that we can be helpful in that process. We want to encourage you to think about 2.0 and get after it. So, Sven, this has been wonderful. Thank you for the time, the attention, the perspective that you shared with us. And if people want to find you online, I know that when you go SudokuPad, you get pushed to the install versions. At least I do on my IP. Where would be best for people to find you, either the online version or otherwise?
Yeah, the easiest place is svencodes.com. So svencodes.com is literally just my link tree kind of page. It's just like, hey, from there I link to my Patreon, to my YouTube channel, my Twitch channel, things like that. The patrons have been absolutely amazing. Like I never expected to get to the, I think it's 127 supporters right now. Like I said, if I could quadruple that number, I'd probably open source the whole thing and just be community supported if I could. So that's been absolutely amazing. The app, somebody recently said, this is the best app he would never use. Like he would, he said 11 out of 10 would buy and not play again, because he said like he knew that buying the app supports me creating the free web app where all the features are. So I really appreciate that. Obviously, I still want to update those apps, and I want to also improve them and eventually add features to them that the free web app doesn't have. But that's how people support me.
You get a sketch of you, 2 laptops, and your pup. Tell us about your pup. He's in the back there.
Yeah, he's literally...
Is it a Frisbee champion?
I was playing with that Frisbee with him earlier, actually. He loves it. He's lying behind me right now because I'm going to be, the girlfriend is abroad for a couple of days. So I'm going to be taking care of him. And I hope he'll forgive me for the lack of his usual trip to the office and all that stuff. And this sketch was actually done by the art director of my previous job as a sort of goodbye gift when I was leaving from there. And it was like, it's framed on my wall. It's a beautiful thing. It's like a fake YouTube video with like comments next to it, which were written by my colleagues from there. And I really loved it so much. I just wanted to have it as a sort of identity for the work I was doing now. Really enjoying it. And it kind of expresses who I am quite well, I think.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you heard my pup alert me that there were humans outside on the recording earlier, and she's laying at my feet at the moment. So
awesome.
Cheers to the 4-legged creatures that help us chase joy.
He's been called Toby the Sudoku dog because of his ever-present appearance on SudokuPad.
That's awesome. Maybe as 2.0, Toby can come out and like push objects around and get in the way.
An animated Toby on the board. That would be amazing. Dream come true.
Yes, dream come true. Okay, well, you heard it here. Head to Sven Codes, and he's got links all over the place and towards more joy in gaming. Have fun, guys.
And from anybody who likes puzzles, if you go to youtube.com/SvenCodes and go to the linked channels page, I'm basically linking all the different YouTube channels that use SudokuPad right now, which is quite a few. And they're all brilliant puzzles, not just the Cracking the Cryptic ones, but there's lots of them out there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you, Sven. It was so good.
Thank you very much.